welcome to the Cube. I'm trying to get the fuck out of here. Matisse Van Rossum.
This room is blue. Hi, I'm Cleveland Mosier.
Welcome to the Timecube. 4 dimensions, 4 sides, everything goes. Have you guys ever gone to timecube.com?
I have not, Ben Sheets.
Okay.
How you doing?
I'm pretty good. If not, you definitely should check it out.
Yeah, what is timecube.com?
Oh my god.
Starting this episode strong.
You
with
guys
an
need to
immediate segue.
enter that rabbit hole. It's like a super long, incredibly detailed website about this unhinged man's hypothesis that time is actually a cube.
But I thought time was a flat circle.
Time is a flat circle.
How can it be a flat circle and a cube?
I'm going to have to pull this website up and read the beginning of it.
Okay. Much like Cube, our podcast has many rooms.
Timecube.com
Is it gone?
is down. Well, I know the dude died recently, unfortunately.
Oh, that's probably why then. Nobody was paying.
Oh, wait.
No?
In 1884, Meridian time personnel meet in Washington to change Earth time. First word said was that only one day could be used on Earth to not change the one-day marshmallow. So they applied the one day and ignored the other 3 days. The marshmallow time was wrong then, and it proved wrong today. This is a major lie. Has so much boring feed from its wrong.
Can we backtrack to what the fuck marshmallow time is? Like, let's...
This lost me immediately.
Let's...
Yeah,
I'm sure it's on. It's a stream of consciousness. Yeah, like...
Holy fuck. Are those diagrams?
Yes.
Oh my god. Okay. Yeah, I might...
Honor the 4 days or you should die.
What does that mean?
96-hour cubic day debunks one day unnatural God.
What 96-hour cube day debunks natural God? What is happening?
Yeah, that's
no
good.
God equates simultaneous 4-day creation in one Earth rotation.
What the
Am I having a stroke?
I feel like it. The real question is he having a stroke? And it seemed like the answer was yes.
Oh,
One
I think-
continuous stroke until he died.
I think this guy was very schizophrenic, to say the least.
No doubt. Yeah, we're talking about Cube today.
But not the time cube
But not-
variety.
Not the Time Cube. We're talking about the 1997 sci-fi thriller horror film Cube, directed by Vincenzo Natali.
Nice.
It's been years since I've seen this movie, but I really, really like this movie still.
Yes.
Same.
This movie is an incredible example of doing a whole lot with very little.
Very, very little.
You know?
And I think that in a lot of ways this film paved the way for franchises like Saw and like Hostel. I almost feel like this movie was kind of early torture porn. It's not really torture porn, but it paved the way for that kind of setup where like a group of strangers wake up in an undisclosed location. They don't know what's going on. They don't know how they've gotten here, but there are traps and stuff that kill them in various horrible ways. This movie is really the first of those that I can think of.
Well, it's interesting because they take that kind of stuck in a maze idea. You know, the idea is 6 different people are put into this weird 15 by 15 cube.
It's 26 by 26.
Oh, 26 by 26. Each side has a door that goes to another cube.
Oh, you were talking
And
about the
it's-
dimensions of the room.
Yeah,
That is 14 by 14.
Yeah, 14 by 14.
The entire massive cube is like 26 cubes
Yes,
across.
and it's a massive, like 3-dimensional maze essentially, but it's full of traps and whatnot. But they take this idea of kind of being stuck in a maze and put almost a Kafka-esque absurdist spin on it.
Yeah, totally. They're taking the concept of a labyrinth and they're putting it into 3 dimensions, man. I haven't seen the Cube sequels, but what they really need to do is go into the 4th dimension.
What if
with
I
the
told you
labyrinth.
they did?
Oh, did they?
Too.
Oh, fantastic. Cube 2 Hypercube?
Yes.
Is that why it's a hypercube?
Yeah.
Because it goes in 4 dimensions. Is Donald Trump playing chess there? One of my favorite things, people who say Donald Trump is playing 4D chess. It seems like what he's doing is stupid and unmotivated, and the ramblings of a late-stage syphilitic man whose brain is melting. But what he's actually doing is so brilliant that we can't even comprehend it without looking into the 4th dimension.
The funniest part is I can guarantee Trump doesn't even know how to play 2D chess. Like,
you're right. This isn't Chapo Trap House though. Let's not get too into politics. Yeah, let's talk more about Cube.
Yes.
Like you were saying, this film is like such a fantastic example of how to do a lot with little. Because they only used one single set, and all they did was change the color of the lights behind the walls.
Question.
Yeah.
Do y'all know, have y'all seen any behind the scenes of the film?
I haven't.
Okay, because I'd be curious to know, like, if there is only one room.
There is.
yes,
I
there
do
is
know,
only
I do know
one
that
room.
for
Okay,
sure.
Very cool. They do a great job of hiding it.
Yeah.
Of covering
It's
it. Wow.
it's one single room. Every time they go into a different room, it's just the same room, but with the lights changed to different color.
Mm-hmm.
That's excellent, because, like,
Yeah.
like, transitioning from, like, space to space, like, there's a number of shots where you can see, like, into the other room, like, clearly.
Oh, well,
like,
I'm sure they would just, like, put up a wall behind them or something.
Yeah.
Of the same material.
Or
Like,
even a green screen and just put it in post.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. Well, it looked good for that however they did it. Yeah.
Well, what I would be willing to bet is that all of the walls are separate and that they can move them as they need to, so they can move them to get different angles. So for those ones where they're in one cube and going into the next one, I'm sure they just moved one of the walls behind them when they were shooting, looking into the next cube. Almost certainly, but they did just have the one set, and they do so much with that and make it feel like such a vast space with just, you know, that one room, which is really, really impressive, and that it doesn't get stale and boring.
No, not at all.
Well, this movie is definitely low budget, you know.
Extremely, yeah.
I don't know the exact amount it costs to make this movie,
I'd be
but
curious to know.
I would be surprised if it was any more than 1 or 2 million.
That's what I would guess, too.
It does not feel like a low budget film. Like,
yeah, 100%. And even the low budget elements of it, like I would say the acting is kind of hammy at times.
Every-
very.
But it's more of a low budget charm to me
every
than it is.
like flaw that this film has like
Okay.
is very forgivable, I think, like, and generally self-aware.
I found the budget. It's 365,000 Canadian dollars.
Oh
It's
wow.
a Canadian film. I don't know what
So
that translates
that would be
into.
even less in US dollars.
Yeah, so
How much
they
is it gross?
well,
'Cause,
let's see.
Damn, like that's just about a guaranteed turnaround.
Oh yeah,
I mean,
well they
100%,
definitely made their
yeah.
money back.
Yeah, I'll say.
$500,000 about, yeah,
Well, it's really
worldwide. Yeah, it was
Limited release.
I mean,
you
yeah,
know?
totally
Yeah,
limited.
But
release.
like this is a movie that has gotten a large cult following
Quite.
Oh,
since it was
totally.
released, to the point where they can make multiple sequels, you know.
Did
It was
Vincenzo Natali do the other two as well?
I don't think he did. I think
think so.
he did a couple other movies after this. His most famous movie he did after this was Splice.
yeah,
came
which
out
I,
in
2009,
Yeah,
which I saw
with
in
Adrian
theaters.
Brody.
Yeah, that's a weird movie.
Interesting movie. Not great, but
Not great. He's
very
directed
unique.
he's directed a lot of TV. I was looking at that too. He's done several episodes of Westworld and American Gods.
Oh, and the
Strain.
2018 Lost in Space too.
Yeah, and Luke Cage and
Oh,
Wayward
fun.
Pines and Hannibal. So yeah, he's done a lot of
Television.
television stuff.
Oh, there's a television I'm a fan of.
Yeah, same. I thought that was interesting. I think that this movie is definitely sort of a cult classic at this point. I think for very good reason, because you can see sort of the other kind of films that it inspired, and you know why it still has this enduring legacy.
I mean, Christ, Saw.
Right,
You know,
exactly.
is
Yeah.
all you need, but then on top of that, there is a large list of films that you can trace back to Cube. I mean, the genre of people waking up in an alien environment trying to escape, with amnesia. Sorry, people waking up with amnesia trying to escape an alien environment is, I probably could count them all on my hands.
Oh, definitely.
There's
not.
a great number of those films, of which I've seen. Because it's largely like
and video games too,
format,
and
exactly.
stuff like that. Yeah,
exactly.
What I really like about Cube too is that it's like a puzzle that they're forced to work together to get out of, whereas in a lot of others it's like people don't necessarily have to work together. It's more about like survival of the fittest, like in a lot of the Saw sequels and stuff. Whereas in Cube, every single person they put in the cube is put there for a reason, because they specialize in something specific that will help them get out of the cube if they work together with the other people and they combine their talents. It's a little bit oversimplified, I think, to an extent, but in a way that doesn't really bother me too much.
Yeah, and that kind of goes into the hamminess of some of the acting, like it is very over the top at times and on the nose.
Extreme.
But like,
and not just the acting, but also the writing.
Yeah,
which I'll definitely get into a little bit.
It's weird for a film that is so heavily character and dialogue driven. I think the dialogue and the acting are two of the worst things about this movie, but it still succeeds despite that.
That's the thing, because like, I don't expect realism or grounded performances in my Cube movie. I'm okay with it being over the top because it is such an absurdist premise.
Yeah,
enough
inherently
films exist in the genre. Like, I'd be happy to watch either, as long as like, if it's hammed up, it's going to be entertaining. Which in this film, it very much so is.
Yeah.
But I like films that are taken. I think we all like films that are taken seriously as well. Like, and if I personally was to have like a preference, I'd probably want one that's like fully taken seriously as well. But that's not for everybody.
Yeah, but at the same time, I don't think it would fit this movie pretty well. I think the hamminess of the performances in this movie work for me because it is such an absurd premise. And I think grounding it would create a weird kind of juxtaposition, because some of the effects are kind of hammy at times with the CG, and
some of the CG
the
doesn't
inherent
look great,
premise of it is very silly and over the top. So,
I mean, I don't think the premise of the premise itself is silly. I think the silliness is brought to the film by the hamminess of the characters, and it works in an entertaining way, but the premise itself is very simple. Like, massive sci-fi trap cube have to get out using math, basically. Like, that's simple, and I think that it could be done just as effectively in a more straightforward, grounded way.
And gritty way too.
I don't think that would take away from it. I just think it would make it.
I think it would make it less entertaining, though.
It would make it a different. I mean, maybe it would make it less like laugh out loud, fun, entertaining. But I think I mean this is.
I think it could be equally engaging.
This is all purely speculative, because it would depend on who you have writing it, the actors you have playing it. It's purely speculative. But I think the premise could be done. Just as well.
Alien, for instance, like isn't too different of a film. Like, there's a small collective of people having to work together to deal with a significant threat. In this case, it's something internal on the ship, as opposed to them escaping the ship or the cube. But like, Alien is very gritty, it's very grounded, it has very little to no campiness in it, and it succeeds. So
but it comes down to the absurdism of the premise, ultimately, in my opinion.
I would think that like the Alien is equally absurd, if not more. Cube is more like grounded in that there is no alien. Everything in Cube is relatively explained. Is explainable.
I don't know about that. I mean, it's very Kafka-esque in this cube. If we even know the true reason why it was created
Right, but like, all the science of the cube can be broken down. Like, all the traps in the rooms, they're all like sensors, they're all...
I don't think that takes away from the absurdism, though, of like the creation of the cube itself, and the cube as a form in itself.
But I mean, I do think it is an absurd high concept thing, but I think it's far less than Alien, is all I'm saying.
I mean, I think that what I like about Cube is that we don't know the purpose of the cube. We have them speculating about it, and the idea of, and I do think that one of the things that works less for me in the movie is the guy talking like he's stating these facts definitively, saying that nobody is running the cube, nobody made the cube for a reason, just a bunch of different bureaucratic processes created this thing and put these people in it for no reason.
I actually kind of like that.
I think it's a fun thing for his character because he's the nihilist of the group, so it makes sense that he would look at the cube from a nihilist perspective, but I don't like that they're treating it like that is definitively
See,
the
I don't know
answer.
if they're treating it like that. I think they're treating
Nobody
it as
challenges him, you know?
his legitimate view on it. You know, it's
Sure.
mirroring his nihilism rather than saying it's the objective truth. Because ultimately, we don't know. I
Right.
mean, especially with the last shot of the movie, they do keep it very ambiguous.
Yeah, like I think the film is still very open-ended on.
I love
what the cube
I love
is.
having the last shot of the
Yeah.
film as just being the last character alive, like just walking into the blinding white light. I do love that the world does not exist outside of the cube in the context of the film. I'm really glad that there's not like the Saw stuff where we get like the flashbacks to what they were doing before they were taken and stuff like that. I'm glad there's none of that.
Yeah.
I appreciate the containment, you know, that for these people the cube is all that exists, and they have this idea about what is beyond the cube, you know, the idea of their lives and their meaning and their purpose in the world, but that's not important to the film.
And
I
that's-
appreciate that.
That's
a lot.
why I
that's,
think it works so well as kind of this absurdist type of thing, because it is just very esoteric
Yeah.
and unplaceable
Well, it's
in a lot of ways.
it's very much a Schrodinger's cat situation.
Schrodinger's cube.
Well, yeah, it literally is, except that the people in the cube are the cat in this case, and it's whether the world outside of them it simultaneously exists and it does not from their perspective. So I do think that is a fun sort of twist on that idea, to look at Schrodinger's cat from the perspective of the cat and see that it is essentially the same. Big fan of that. I think that the premise of this film is by far its strongest point, and
Yes.
why
Yes.
it works. And I think that, unlike you, I don't know if I agree that it works because of the hamminess. For me, I think it works despite the hamminess, because it is such a strong concept, and that the ideas behind it are really clever, especially treating the cube as like a puzzle box and having to like look at the serial numbers in between each cube to be able to determine where each cube is in the larger
Yeah,
cube.
definitely. And
I think that stuff is really
I think that
clever.
stuff works excellently.
Yeah.
You know, that it's weird having a horror movie so based on math. You
Right.
know,
Mhm.
and
it's great for it.
But the thing is, like, I would argue that it simply adds to it. It
No,
does.
I agree
It's
with
not.
you, actually.
It's
Like-
not good because of the hammy acting, but like a lot of times with Kafka-esque stuff, you do get very
Sure.
large performances
And
because
navel gazing.
you know.
Yeah,
Agreed.
and this film
Yeah.
definitely doesn't feel like navel gazy. I think because of like the ham, and I agree. I don't think that this film succeeds in spite of the hammy acting. I think that it does bring a good deal of charm to the film, and with the writing as well, because like there's a lot of like very directly presented like philosophical concepts that I would wonder if like these characters in like a survival scenario would be like philosophizing that way, like, which feels very stage play esque. I still liked it for that, and I think it did like bring a certain like character to the film and enhance it. I think that if the film theoretically had been done seriously well, also it could have been equally good. Like, and it could have been good because of those things too. I think that there's multiple ways to have a great movie.
That's the thing I like about it, though, is because it's hammy and over the top, it's less about real survival, in my opinion, and more about the ideas behind the stuff. You know, the idea of the cube, the idea of
Sure.
Schrodinger's cat being stuck in an endless maze. Whereas if it was more realistic, I think it would be more based on the survivalistic kind of stuff, which is definitely in there.
Could be.
But I think it's toned down a little bit in light of bigger ideas.
Sure, and it also kind of lets you like mentally play in the space a little bit better while you're watching the film, because you're less attached to the characters and because you're not necessarily seeing it as such a tangible thing, as something that is a little bit less based in realism and gripping, because they're kind of hammy characters. Yeah, it lets you sort of like be a little bit less attached to them, and in a horror environment, like sometimes that can come to succeed, sometimes it doesn't. And in this case, I think it does.
The characters themselves are very archetypical as well,
Quite.
which I think that sort of helps with the hamminess, because it's not so much about like the characters exhibiting nuance, it's that they're filling a specific role. So having very one-note performances from each of them sort of enhances that idea. And that's not to say that the film couldn't be done with more nuanced, complex characters. I think that would be very interesting in its own right, in a very different way. But if you're going to go with the archetype method, then I think that is like having one-note characters is probably the way to do it.
Yeah, definitely.
Oh, for sure. And it definitely, because this film tries to get into the philosophy of it, and largely I think it has I won't say it succeeds, but it has a good time with it. And it does make that easier, when you have that almost like stage play sort of representation. Yeah. That what's the he wrote Candide, the French philosopher who would write stories, that sort of Voltaire, yeah, it's very Voltaire-esque, like having like these philosophers in a scenario, and the film exists as a dialogue around them, and this kid's like, oh well, is it was this set up by the government as a right hand knows not what the left hand is doing, but there's still a puppet master in charge of this weird cube thing? Or is it just a bureaucratic mess? Is it just something that happened? Or is it aliens? We don't know. Is it all three? Like, who's to say?
Well, I like that the doctor character also turns out to be like the tinfoil hat conspiracy theorist.
Sure.
Which I think is pretty funny, considering that like she is a doctor, so she's like a very logical, rational-minded person, but she's still one of those, like, if this film was set in modern day, like, she would be an Alex Jones type, you know?
Of course.
Which I think is really funny.
And largely believable, too. Like, I've met plenty of people.
I definitely buy it. It's not what I would expect from that character. Like, I would expect the conspiracy theorist to be, like, the student, the math whiz girl or something.
Yeah. Or, like the escape artist character.
Or, yeah.
Like a lower income, like, kind of rednecky person.
Man,
probably.
that's a really great subversion of expectation, that the escape artist character is one of the first to die.
Great.
It
really
does a great job really setting the stakes of the rest of the movie,
yes,
too.
It does.
Outside of the very cold open scene where we get the guy very coolly
the one guy
cubed up.
Oh man, that's some like for the low budget, like the effects, the practical effects are really good. Like when the dude gets sliced into just a bunch of different pieces by like the
diced.
The wire. Yeah, literally diced into just a bunch of pieces.
Meat cubes.
Cubes.
That cold open is fantastic.
Yeah.
I love it. And that effect is so great too.
Yeah, and just watching like him, kind of tumble apart was really
definitely
gross as well.
It's very visceral. But besides that, the first real trap that we see is from Ren, who's the escape artist master. And then
he's
until then,
7 different
up until then,
Ren.
he seems like he's super on top of it. Mm-hmm. And to subvert that by making him the first to get killed by traps.
Well, it's great because he's approaching testing each room from a very like common sense, like street logic based approach. He ties his boots, with a long shoelace and like throws it into each of the rooms to see if it triggers a motion activated trap, which is smart. He even catches that like some of the sensors are based on like smell or something like that. He can tell because the air smells dry in the room. So it's like very logical, but then he dies, and so we see that just that basic kind of like street smarts is not enough. That in order to really detect the traps, there's a higher level of logic required, which turns out to be math-based, which is very cool, and also I would be screwed in that situation. Just absolutely. A whole time I was watching this movie, I couldn't stop thinking, it's like, man, if I was in this situation, I would be completely useless. Like, everybody has, their own special, like, niches. Like, you got the doctor, you got the guy who's the cop, you got the math whiz, you've got the guy who designed the outer shell. Everybody fills their niche. And I'd be like, well, I don't have the upper body strength to climb through the doors in the ceiling, so that's my special ability.
Yeah, I can't exactly like paint my way out of that situation.
Right.
Yeah.
And no, it's true, and which is great too for like any average viewer.
Yeah.
One thing to
I do want to go back to the Ren thing for just a second, because he is the first to die, and it really sets the stakes, because his death scene is one of the most visceral moments in the movie.
True.
It's amazing.
Before you describe it, can I mention one thing about him too, like that was very personal for me?
Sure.
And I'll let you describe it, because that's fun. The first time I watched this movie, I must have been like maybe 16 or so, like, and I was just getting into horror movies, if I'm remembering correctly. And when I was a child growing up, there was this weird like Canadian show called Red Green that was about like a handyman sort of guy, and it was like really hard to get a hold of. For whatever reason, my family had a VHS like tape of it, and this guy was in it. Oh, sorry.
I remember seeing it all the time on public television.
Yeah, it was a public television sort of show, and we had it on tape, and so I grew up like watching Red Green on repeat. So it was like a very like key part of like just a niche bit of aspect of my childhood. And that actor's in it. He plays like this like skeezy neighbor who's always stealing shit. So whenever Red Green's like inventing something with him, like he all of his parts are usually like stolen or whatever. And it was just really weird for me seeing this character like from my childhood that I had like this weird association with just getting like killed off in this movie like brutally. So to continue on with that, so you just imagine like young me watching that and being very confused.
Yeah, well, he goes into a room expecting no traps, and he gets sprayed by acid.
Yeah, like
in the
sulfuric.
face.
Like,
Yeah.
right in the face, yeah.
And they pull him out of the room, and it's one of the best effects in the movie, in my opinion.
Oh yeah.
Yeah.
His face
It's one of
just
the only really graphic deaths
essentially
other than the
just
very first
caves
one.
in, and it's just like a hole,
It's
a
got
huge hole in
Bowl
his...
face.
Yeah. And the effect is incredible.
It looks really good. Yeah, it's great.
All like the crusting around the edges,
Yeah.
like from the acid.
Yeah,
and-
the smoking and the sizzling.
Mm-hmm.
It's really nasty. Yeah, I think it's the only other really visceral death that we see in the movie, other than the first guy, the guy getting diced.
It's such a great way of building tension for the rest of the movie, though.
It
Oh,
sets it
because
sets the stakes really
while
high
we
as
don't
well.
really get any other scene as visceral as that in the rest of the movie, because we saw that early on to a character we thought had his shit together, it really puts us in a mindset of they need to be super careful.
Right.
Not only do they need to be super careful, but also odds are they won't make it out alive. Which kind of again helps you like bridge that distance a little bit and like play in the world mentally while you're watching the film, because the odds are they won't make it out of there, and it's rare that a film can set that precedent and then defy that at the end and relatively believably or to a satisfying degree. Normally when it's against all odds, like the character you have to do a plot armor or some shit to actually.
Well,
get them out of it.
what I actually like about the ending of the movie is that the only person who escapes is the one who is least equipped to do so. That he gets out because of the work of everybody else, but ultimately their own personal egos and survival of the fittest, reptile brain stuff turns them all against each other and ends up getting them all killed. And like the mentally handicapped guy, who if he was left completely alone would 100% die in there, is the one who who makes it out.
And believably too.
Right,
which is
exactly.
great. Like
yeah.
it's almost more of like a fluke of events. Like, and
And
it's one like he does have agency in. Like he very much so like is responsible for getting out of the cube.
Well, I mean, yeah, he helps get them out because he's like a savant, so
Mm-hmm.
he can help the math whiz by immediately knowing the factors of these like enormous numbers.
Yeah, all the prime numbers.
He's Rain Man basically, but like it's them having to move him from room to room and help him. He otherwise wouldn't be able to, and he's also in a sense the purist because he's the one who's completely devoid of the ego and the mistrust that ends up biting everybody else in the ass.
And I think it works so well putting that kind of metaphorical spin on it. Having him be the only pure one because he doesn't have enough function to be jaded by kind of the evil of humanity.
He's still a tabula rasa, yeah.
You know,
Right.
and in some aspects, I kind of see this movie as kind of a metaphor for purgatory in some ways, or original sin, stuff like that, where all these people are trying to reach heaven, which is, the outside, but all their shortcomings essentially keep them.
Totally.
Oh yeah,
Well, I
and
mean,
the
that's-
film is very aware of that too. It's
that's-
just like him walking into like the holy light at the
Yeah.
end.
The blinding light, into salvation. Well, and I mean that's really the great thing too, is because like together this collection of people have all of the skills to get out of the cube, all of them together. Like if they would just trust one another and totally work together and do it for the sake of the group rather than the sake of the individual, they all would have made it out. But it's because they're naturally, like you said, they're jaded by the real world and they don't trust people and they're egotistical and self-centered, so that ultimately ends up in their self-destruction. It's just like in D&D. If they had done it, if they had been party-centric and they had tried to get out of the dungeon together, they would have succeeded. But because they weren't party-centric, they ended up failing.
Mm-hmm.
And they died in the dungeon.
Yeah.
It's
cool too because I like to think that the cop character I definitely want to dig on a little bit.
Yes, this movie is very anti-cop.
Yeah,
which
it's interesting to
endorse
because like it's very clear too that like he by the end of it especially like he is not one of the good ones. He's a bad cop. Like by the end he has a full blown psychotic break, which I enjoyed, and I think almost that you could theorize that he was placed amongst them like as a trap, even against his own knowledge, because he sort of acts as the inverse of the mentally handicapped character. What was it? Does he have a name? Is he named in the film?
Kazan.
Yeah. Like he sort of acts as like the antithesis of Kazan because he starts out being the self-appointed hero character. He's this sort of white knight who tries to be like the team leader.
He's decisive. At the beginning he does succeed in like snapping everybody out of their shocked inactivity, because he himself is so driven by survival that he wants to get out. So he does fill that necessary niche in the party of being the decisive leader who motivates everybody else.
Well,
but the problem is he's too mistrusting and egotistical, and like you said, it leads to him having a psychotic break where that overwhelming, that aggressive mentality ends up, like you said, being a trap. It destroys the party.
On top of that, one of the funniest turns of that, the most interesting turns of that, is one of them initially said, we should just stay here.
Right.
And because Quentin, the cop character, was so adamant about keeping moving to escape the maze, they moved. And ultimately, they found out that the room they started in was probably the room they should have stayed in all along.
It was the room that connects to the outside as the bridge. Yeah, that if they had just stayed there, eventually that room would have moved back to the entrance and they could have just walked out. Yeah, that's a really fun twist. And it's realistic too, because like if you were in that situation, I think 100% of the time you would always leave the room. you would only stay there for so long. You would never, if put in that situation, think that if I stay here in this space where I woke up, eventually it will allow me to leave. Which is why it's so ingenious that is, like, that's all they should have done. They should have just stayed still. But who's going to do that? Nobody, ever. The first time you see it, too, it's also a great twist that the rooms in the cube move. So it's like you can't even track your fixed progress because it's constantly shifting.
Well, it's cool because they are able to track their progress because of like the
numbers, right? But
yeah.
they have to use a much more complicated formula. I also love that in the movie that the progression of the significance of the serial numbers, what they mean, because at first they just are like, oh well, if any one of the numbers in the sequence is prime, then that room is a trap. So that's how they know how to avoid traps. But then they realize, no, they're actually markers on a three-dimensional map to show where we are in the room. Okay, so I can figure out how to get to the edge. Oh shit, well the rooms are moving. Oh no, the numbers actually turn out to mark the progress of the rooms, their original place in the cube, and how they move throughout it. So the significance of the numbers becomes more and more complex throughout the film, which is, I think, an excellent progression. It's how you keep the tension moving while using the same materials that you have from the very beginning, which is really clever writing.
Oh yeah, it turns it back into a mental maze
without having they're able to progress the story without having to introduce new elements. It's just recontextualizing the elements that they already have, which is great. It's one of the things I like so much about the movie.
Yeah. It turns a singular box set into a magic forest.
Yeah.
Really.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, with all of its own little rules, which is just wonderful. Because I mean, that's my favorite thing, especially like coming from us to like being like into video games so much, which are large like story-based puzzle boxes largely.
Yeah, totally.
That appeals to me very deeply. Like any film that has a like sort of a big puzzle to solve like that, like a labyrinth to navigate, or some sort of escape room situation like in Saw. I always like.
Yeah, this is a movie for nerds, is what you're saying.
Proudly.
Math horror.
Math horror.
One thing I want to mention really quick is the ending with the ambiguity is so good, and it really hits home kind of the ideas and the concepts of this film. I do want to touch on just for a second with the second one. They do have a bit of an ambiguous ending, but they try to explain a bit more. And honestly, that's my biggest problem with the second one.
Oh, yeah.
It makes me appreciate kind of the simplicity of the ending of this one all the more.
There are ways to do ambiguity right, and there are a lot of ways to fuck it up. Like,
well, it's
with a film like this that's about solving a puzzle, you have to be so careful, like setting it up, because the payoff of the film should be solving the riddle. What is the cube? So to have me come out of it still not knowing like exactly what this cube is and being quite satisfied with the film is a feat. Like it's well
because
done.
it's what is the cube doesn't matter so much as to how do we get out of the cube.
Mm-hmm.
Like
and the way that they steer around that is very good, because at the beginning it is about what is this cube, like, and they have that whole series of conversations about it, and by the end it's like, fuck it, doesn't matter, we just have to get out.
Well, that's the thing, a lot of the shortcomings of the characters are because they're so determined to figure out what the cube is. They're so quick to point the blame on each other for putting them in there or creating the cube or stuff like that they kind of fall short because of that.
Now here's a question I have for you guys on that subject. How do you guys feel about the revelation that the one character is like an architect, and that he designed like the outer shell of the cube? How do y'all feel about that?
Loved it because they presented it as a twist, and especially when you compare it immediately to Saw, which has Jigsaw in his own puzzle,
right,
is the twist for the first film. I love that there's a double subversion there. The first subversion being this regular guy was actually associated with it. And most films would stop there, and he'd just be like culpable, and it would be revealed much later in the story, and he'd be some sort of antagonist. This film subverts that a second time by the end of that dialogue sequence, where you find out that he's just a guy. He's just a guy who designed the outer shell, and beyond that, like, he's not culpable. He doesn't know what's going on. For him, it was just a good, well-paying gig. I love that. I thought it brought a sense of realism to it also.
Well, yeah, and the nice thing is, while it is there, it still doesn't explain what the cube is.
Yeah, we still
or
don't
like
know
if created it in any way.
Right, which is why I can't even say that I really have a problem with it, just because like I don't necessarily want to know more about the cube, because I think that is the strong suit, is that it doesn't matter, and having him be involved in the creation I think almost hurts it, but at the same time it is necessary for his character motivation, for him to have this nihilistic viewpoint that adds to the world building. So it's weird for me. As a device, I don't like it very much, but I think it's necessary. So ultimately...
The reason it works for me is it feels like the three blind mice and the elephant, I think it is, where
those are three blind men like feeling the elephant.
Yeah.
One of them thinks it's a snake because he's holding the trunk. One of them thinks it's a tree because he's touching the back leg.
He has a bit of it, but
Right.
he still doesn't
Correct.
know the big
Well,
picture.
that's
And to build on it too.
if he knew any more than that, I would definitely not like it.
Oh yeah, no,
Yeah.
for sure. And I think that
The fact that he doesn't really know anything beyond the dimensions of the cube because he built the outer shell. If it was any more than that, it would piss me off.
Here's why I think it's almost fundamental, or it's almost necessary that the information he has needs to be delivered for the film. Because up until then, you could be wondering, is it aliens? Are they dead? Is it whatever else like that? And what he essentially brings to the table is that it was at least largely made by people.
Yeah.
And
That's
so
true.
that means that all the laws that we can apply to the cube are of this world. And so we know that it can be solved with science, it can be dealt with, and that is brought up at a very crucial point in the movie too, where that's where like the math and the science really starts kicking off.
Well, right, because he knows the dimensions of the cube, so the math nerd
Exactly,
girl
and it all sets off from there.
can figure out how to map their progress through the cube based on its dimensions, and that they know that it is a perfect cube,
Right.
that it is the same length, width, and height.
And from a moviegoer's perspective, up until that information is given to you, the most logical step, again, not from a realistic perspective, from a moviegoer's perspective, is that they were abducted by aliens and
Right.
put it in a
Sure.
trap to be analyzed.
To
I
be
love
studied,
that
yeah.
because that could still be the case. They could still be part of like some psychological survey, or that could be one of the functions of the cube.
Well, right,
We know there are sensors in there; they're probably being watched.
It's not coincidence that they all happen to have a piece of the proper skill set to get them out. You know, like they're chosen for a reason, but why that is not important, which I like. And I think you're right. I think my problem with it is just because that scene where he's explaining all of that and they start arguing, the dialogue probably bothers me in that scene more than any other, just because it's not very well written.
Because it's
But
very
I think-
open.
But I think in terms,
It's very direct exposition.
I think you're absolutely right. Like in terms of being a necessity to the plot, like you're absolutely right. Like it is essential information, and it's a good way to deliver that information. I just don't think the dialogue is very well written, and I think that's the case for most of the movie. And I think in that
It's
scene,
definitely not
in that
believably
scene,
written.
in that scene, it bothers me the most, and maybe that's why I'm just kind of like, I don't know. But no, you're absolutely right.
Yeah, and
It's important.
tricky.
It's important.
Like,
Y'all are
'cause,
right.
the ambiguity there, like, is fundamental, and I also fully agree with you that like knowing any more information would
It'd be
harm,
too much,
Would,
yeah.
would harm it, but just enough to know like that it's made by people gives me a great sense of wonderment about it as well. Being like, holy shit, like the fact that like something like in this world could be built like that's that large, like underground. Where is it? It presents so many new questions. A lot of which are asked. by the characters as well. And I love that, because that's also like when we start to see like the Doctor spiraling out a little bit and going on like her kooky ideas about like
Right.
the government and shit, and the other guy like, and the same guy just like shuts her down. And again, like him being a nihilist is so fundamental in that role, because he almost irrefutably believes that no one is responsible. But think also like that in a way is a mechanism to admonish his own guilt.
Sure.
Right? Because if someone
That's a good
is
point.
responsible, he's responsible. And he wants to refute that however he can. So his only option is, at that point, is nihilism. Or it's either nihilism or be guilty. And by the end of the film, it catches up with him. Like, and he does. You still see that he does feel a sense of culpability.
He sacrifices himself. He refuses to leave because he has nothing to live for, but it ends up he ends up making the noble sacrifice and holding back Quentin so the mentally handicapped guy can still escape. So he sort of redeems himself for his part in this great sin. Y'all are right. I appreciate that. I think it is necessary.
Well, that's what we're here for, right? Is like to discuss the nuances of the film.
Yeah, I just some of the dialogue is just bad in this movie.
No, and like your approach to that was very valid too, like to that perspective.
It's just like it's hard for me to buy stuff like that because I can't stop thinking like that's not how people would talk.
Yeah.
And I think that's why it stands out as like something glaring to me, which is weird because like from a structural standpoint, like this film is really well written. It's just that like the dialogue is just not good.
Right. Well, it's not how people talk. It's how that information needs to be delivered to
yeah,
from the script, and
which
it's not like hidden as much.
Which is in most formats something that I would find extremely frustrating because I really hate exposition. Well, exposition dumps, and this in a lot of ways. This entire movie is kind of an exposition dump.
Sure, I mean it's only on one set, so much of like the world building and
it's dialogue driven.
Yeah,
no, but that's the thing. It's like I feel like something like that would normally frustrate me so horrifically in just about any other movie. I still think that this is a great film.
See, and
which is why I was saying earlier that I think that the movie works in spite of that because I'm able to look past it and still get so much enjoyment out of the film as a whole.
It's interesting though because the dialogue, while it's very not naturalistic, at times it reminds me of David Lynch's work almost, in that, you know, it doesn't feel like something people would say, but it works because of the strangeness and kind of the ideas.
Yes, I think I can be more forgiving of it in Lynch's stuff because he is such a surrealist, and that a lot of his stuff does just feel like the entire thing is a dream. And I think that Cube is more it's somewhat absurdist, but it's not particularly surreal. It's pretty grounded in the laws of reality.
Right, like so when we're pulling from like stylistic cohesion, right? Like Lynch's films exist as like as stylistically surreal. Whereas this film is trying to build around like laws and rules and such. I still think it works.
Yeah.
And what I'll say too about the dialogue, to kind of put a cap on that, for me, there are times where the dialogue suffers. There are times where it doesn't, and there's a lot of crossover in the film where I think that the dialogue is theoretically like well written. It's just being delivered in a very hammy fashion.
Yeah.
Well, not even flatly, but too over stylized, like overbaked. Like the cop character, like his descent into madness is very like very Vincent Price-esque. Like he does a lot of like big eye, you know, like
he's constantly bug-eyed.
Yeah, like he kind of like does this weird like almost looks at the camera like sort of moments and mumbles to himself. Like it's very like movie character going mad, not an actual descent into madness from exhaustion or, you know, general like hunger and fatigue. Now, that being said, I love his ham. I love Vincent Price. Like, I love those things. So it didn't bother me, you know, like, at all. But I think that, like, I will excuse, like, not every sequence of the dialogue. Like, what we were talking about with the architect character and whatnot. I think that those flaws still apply. Again, they're very forgivable flaws because they're necessary. But when it comes to like some of the dialogue sequences, I also think that can be forgivable at times as well. Not all the time. There are
there's a couple of
choice
choice lines.
Most definitely.
Where
I would cover my tracks.
I had to groan at a couple choice lines.
What are a few of them? I'm trying to remember.
Usually, whenever the math girl talks about her brain, those made me groan. It's not a gift; it's math.
Yeah. Oh God. Oh jeez. Yeah.
I almost found like at least like the very last one I actually really like that when he's like throwing her around and saying like you need to solve this problem like this math formula and she's like I literally can't
well that's the thing it
takes,
works
like a computer processor.
It works in the structure of the film but the way it's delivered the way it was delivered was a little groan worthy.
Yeah, I agree.
Speaking of the math character, I had something I thought about. I don't see it as a problem for the film necessarily. I think it's a bit of a problem for the tabula rasa metaphor because she's also relatively like quote pure unquote. Like her character is a protagonist throughout the entirety of the film.
Yeah.
She is good. She never makes any decisions that are of ill intent. She's not even responsible for like trying to hold back the cop who's already murdered several people at that point. Like, even then, like, she doesn't go that far. It's the architect who does, to try and save them.
Well, because at that point, the cop has murdered her.
No. I'm talking about, like, when they're all making their way to the end, she's solved the problem, the cop has killed the doctor, and the architect, like, shoves the door up on his head to try and, like, hold him back. She's still very alive at that point.
Yeah.
And again, she wasn't culpable during that time. Like, during that, like, sort of, quote, betrayal, even though it's a survivalistic choice. I'm saying even for that, which is, like, justified, she's made to be not responsible for. She is equally, like, pure of heart or whatever.
True.
And, like...
Agreed.
It's interesting because she doesn't make it out, like, by a fluke, also, like, just to be killed at the very end.
Yeah, she gets killed by the evil cop.
Yeah.
Right. She doesn't make it out, not because of her... any fault of her own, but because she becomes a victim.
Right, which just give us a great like tragic moment as well, especially for the very end, and also like it would have been a worse ending if she and Kazan made it out like together. It would have been weird.
It wouldn't have had quite the impact. I think she needs to die just because Kazan making it out by himself is so much more
poignant.
Yeah, poignant and significant for that at the very end. You're absolutely right. Like she is a genuinely good, pure of heart character. By all, no less so than Kazan. Maybe a little bit more jaded because she's not like mentally handicapped. But she is still that that good character, so she has every right to have made it out just like he did.
Yeah, and instead she sort of acts as like a virginal sacrifice, which is kind of when it comes to like plot point like breakdowns, it's a little heavy, but again, like so we could get the cool moment with Kazan getting out at the end. I do understand it,
and so we can have the dramatic moment of Quentin coming back after they think that they've already killed him.
Sure.
Of him to make a final appearance at the very end.
Also, I do like, because they make it clear, too, that, like, you can hear from the other cubes.
Yeah.
Like, you can believe that he just kept tracking them, like, that whole time, and that's how he got out.
You'd think so. I mean, we saw he fell through the hole head first, and we saw him lying on the floor with a big pool of blood under his head. So it's a little plot armory, I think.
Well,
to have by the time if he regained consciousness by that time, not only would his brain be hemorrhaging horribly, but also they would probably be several cubes ahead of him by now.
On the flip side, though,
but
Quentin does throw the other guy into the cube below earlier, and he is fine,
It's true. Like, and he
falls
was
that
already
distance,
injured.
But...
He had the cut in his leg that could have opened. There are a few like ways you could almost justify the blood, and it's a little overdone so that you don't expect it later on.
Well, of course, it needs
I
to
agree
be.
with that.
It needs to be a surprise threat at the end when they think that they've all made it out.
And also, potentially,
it works.
the cube that he was thrown into, because they don't read the serial number for that one, could have also transported him near them.
Could have.
Towards the very end, and he would have only had to navigate like 1 or 2 cubes.
It's getting really nitpicky.
Sure, it's fun.
I like
for me. I enjoy like.
I don't mind the plot armor because it makes the ending more dramatic. Yes. I don't have a problem with it because it makes the ending more dramatic and satisfying.
Yeah,
I don't.
You know, it's like it's one of those things that if you want to nitpick it and get really technical with it, you totally can.
But you're missing the point.
But
of,
yeah, so
of it
like,
narratively.
My thought is like I enjoy it for what it is, but I also enjoy the nitpick.
Sure,
like,
it can be fun.
Getting into the world building and how it's set up and why. I mean,
totally.
You know, like so, it can be fun, but I still like it for all those things as well.
Yeah. Well, do y'all want to rate?
Is there anything else we needed to cover?
No, I think we're good. No? Why don't you start, Cleveland?
Okay, yeah. I'm gonna give it a whole 25 gumdrops. JK.
25 bags 25 or boxes?
Oh, boxes.
They come in bags.
Yeah. I'm gonna give it. You know what? 4 out of 5.
Yeah, me too. I think it's overall a pretty strong film. I've got problems with some of the dialogue and some of the acting, but I think that it's ultimately a really strong premise, does so much with so little, is so clever in so many ways, has some great effects, really fun to watch. A great sci-fi horror cult classic, you know.
It's a fun movie and holds up.
Yeah, it's great. I think so too. So strong 4 out of 5 from me as well.
I'm actually going to give it a 4.5 out of 5. Ooh, I think this is one of my favorite low-budget horror movies. One of my favorite low-budget movies in general. It's a great masterclass of doing a whole lot with very little. It has its charms, you know. Some of the writing and performances can be a bit hammy, and some of the logic isn't always super tight. In spite of that, it works because it's usually a charm of the movie rather than a shortcoming. So yeah, it's definitely worth checking out.
All right, so that'll be a 4.2 out of 5 pods for Cube. Yeah, and I think now it's probably time for a word from our sponsor, right?
Yeah, sure is. Shoot. It's not even a bit. All right.
Just read the copy, Cleve.
I know.
You have it right in front of you.
I sure do. Thank you for reminding me about the copy paper, because coincidentally, this week is actually brought to us by Jacob Johnson and affiliates. .lib apparently are sponsors this week, and they specialize in making copy paper for sponsors. So have you got a sponsor on your program that you need to sponsor but can't remember them? Well, check out whatever the fuck I just said, and they'll hook you up and get you a good sponsor so you can finally stop improvising all your show sponsors and actually remember what they are, just like I did right now. Isn't that something? Johnson now, and whatever the fuck I said.
Now, if I understand correctly,
you sure do.
Jacob Johnson and affiliates.co.lib is in fact a subsidiary of the Sponsor Shelf.
Oh God. Are they? Oh no.
Well, yeah, because I mean, you need to have the copy papers for your books on your sponsor shelf. So all hail the Sponsor Shelf.
Oh, wait, hold on. I'm looking back at the copy paper now, and all of the...
You'll see how the letters are, like, reassembling themselves?
Yeah, that's pretty weird, man.
Yeah, it's like making a pentagram.
That's weird. What's up with that? Should I return this?
It probably...
No, definitely not.
Okay, don't return it.
What I would say is it almost certainly has nothing to do with the 3 new sponsor shelves that have appeared in the apartment.
Nah, I couldn't
Definitely.
That's crazy.
That's just a fluke.
Yeah.
Well, that'll bring us to the end of this week's episode. Ben, what's on our schedule for next week?
I believe it is your pick.
My pick?
Actually, yeah.
Oh, shit. Okay. Well, then next week, we're going to be talking about Werner Herzog's 1977 remake of Nosferatu. It's a film that I've seen many times. I love it, and I'm excited to watch it again and talk about it. Have either of you seen this movie?
I have.
I
I
actually
saw
have
a projector out at a friend's farm on Halloween.
Oh, fantastic.
It was rad.
What a
We
great-
sat on bales of hay and watched it.
Dope. Yeah, I'm
Nice.
excited. So,
Werner Herzog's one of my favorite, but this is one of the ones that I actually haven't seen, so...
Cool. I'm excited.
Oh, really?
I love this movie.
I'm curious. I was 18 when I saw it last time, and I was a little jaded. So I'd like to see how I feel about it now. I think I'll probably be a little bit more open to it.
Yeah, I'm curious because this is probably one of my favorite movies of all time. So I'm pretty excited. So stay tuned next week for Nosferatu. Until then, if you like the show and you want to hear more, then go on to the podcast place, where you get all of your podcasts.
If you're
And
listening to this, you're already there.
You're already there, and all you gotta do is look for the stars and smash the fuck out of the 5 stars.
Smash it.
Unless it's out of 10.
Unless
and
it's out of 10, then
then-
smash the 10 stars. But as far as I know, most of them are out of 5. And after you've smashed the 5 so hard that you've broken your phone or your keyboard or
your
whatever,
fingers.
or your fingers
Yeah.
or whatever you're doing this on, then hopefully not your fingers, because you're going to need them to also leave us a nice review
Thankfully,
after the 5 stars.
You most likely have 2 hands.
You probably do have 2 hands, maybe more, but that's also to say this is not an ableist podcast, so if you don't have 2 hands, that's fine. Use
Your nose.
text
Whatever
to,
you do use, we're not
text
going to
to
assume.
speech. Yeah, whatever. The point is leave us a nice review as well, and follow us on Twitter also at PodPeoplePod, and on Letterboxd, where we have a whole list of all of the films we've talked about on the show with our average ratings and the links to the corresponding episodes. That's letterboxd.com/podpeoplepod.
Yeah, hit that up. You might disagree with some things.
Yeah.
We'd love to hear your
Al-
opinions on
almost
Twitter.
certainly, yeah. If you want to disagree with us about something, feel free to do so on Twitter.
Or you can email Cleveland Mosher at yahoo.com.
Bummer.
Got him.
Oh yeah, sure did. You can actually find me on, or we're done with the ref. Okay, go. Yeah, you can actually find me on ArtStation primarily, Cleveland Mosher or Iron Prism, as well as tweeting for the Light Arc Studio Twitter account. We've got some cool stuff going on right now. You should check out our website at lightarcstudio.com, or just Google "It Stares Back." And
Join
check
our
out
Discord.
the cool game that we're working on. It's all cybernetic, medieval, astral, electro horror. It's rad. And we're very
pretty
proud of
dope.
it.
Yeah, join
yeah.
our Discord. That's where you can get the game right now.
Yeah, and watch us work on the game in real time, and join our super cool community of people that we've kind of gathered together.
True story. And we also Twitch stream us playing video games sometimes, usually every Thursday night. So far that's been really fun. So if you wanna
It's been a blast.
if you wanna watch us play video games or watch Cleveland paint in real time, all of that can be found through our Discord.
Oh man,
So,
if you like watching paint dry, if I got the channel for you.
yeah, you can follow me personally on Twitter at Mr. Van Awesome.
And I'm at Mr. Sheets.
And yeah, that should wrap it all up. Thanks for listening. Tune back next week for some excellent vampire blood-sucking horror spectacular. Until then, stay out of the green rooms.
And most importantly, mom and dad opposites occur simultaneously with a baby birth, with the potential for creating opposite burritos, existing only as opposites and a zero-value existence that cancel to